Part 4 of Start Here, a historical overview of Palestine. You'd think we would tell this story chronologically, but actually I'm going to start in 1948 with the Nakba. It's the most important event that occurred in this story, and if you look that word up, you'll pretty much learn everything you need to know. Nakba is an Arabic word that means catastrophe, and it's the name of the invasion of Palestine by violent European Zionists, the culmination of a 50-year project to colonize Palestine by any means necessary. This resulted in the deaths of an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 indigenous Palestinians, plus the displacement of at least 750,000 more, and the ethnic cleansing or total eradication of over 400 Palestinian towns and villages. By all good faith accounts, this signifies the final attempt of so-called Old World European settler colonialism, the forcible removal of an indigenous population. This brand of colonialism essentially did not survive World War II with the independence of India and other territories. Basically, colonial powers just could not survive and switched to things like economic neo-colonialism and so on. This is perhaps best summarized in a quote from a Tony Judt article from 2003, which was also referenced in a 2020 book by Rashid, Khalidi, The 100 Years' War on Palestine. Quote, "The problem with Israel, in short, is not, as is sometimes suggested, that it is a European enclave in the Arab world, but rather that it arrived too late. It has imported a characteristically late 19th century separatist project into a world that has moved on, a world of individual rights, open frontiers, and international law. The very idea of a Jewish state, a state in which Jews and the Jewish religion have exclusive privileges from which non-Jewish citizens are forever excluded, is rooted in another time and place. Israel, in short, is an anachronism." Now, any event, whether you're moving forward or backward from 1948, has its own Zionist refutation. The further back you go, the more absurd they become, but it still exists. However, we are not here to enforce ideas we already have, but rather to test ideas to see how brittle they are. Unlearn the bullshit. In the context of Zionism, at least, I find it useful to split the history of Palestine into 4 different eras. The first is the modern era, everything from the Nakba up till now. The second is everything from the late 1800s up to the Nakba. The third is the entire span of time from the early Christian era up to the late Ottoman Empire. And the fourth is from the early Christian era dating all the way back into the Bronze Age. Now, people who support Zionism, and remember that's not a proxy for meaning Jewish people, there are more Christian Zionists in this world than there are Jewish Zionists, will talk about era number 4, from the early Christian era back into the Bronze Age, a lot. And I mean a lot. Just from my own experience and watching my comments on my posts, this is almost always just a distraction, an attempt to pull people into weird religious arguments that have no relevance today, because it keeps people from looking up things from eras 1 and 2. It really shouldn't need to be explained that no matter what, we should not be appealing to 2,000 and 3,000-year-old religious texts to try and justify harming people today. The third era, from around 70 CE up to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, is particularly fascinating to me. The reason being is that this era is so full of Muslims and Jews supporting each other, particularly in the face of Christian oppression, that I'm pretty sure that's why there's so much hand-waving about it in Zionist arguments. They will try and point to a few instances of violence or oppression, or they will point to the dhimmi system, which is a second citizenship system that a lot of Islamic empires had, both for Jewish people and Christians. And they'll basically ignore the fact that essentially throughout that entire 1500-year history, it's Jews and Muslims against Christians, like the whole time. The story of Jewish people in Muslim lands, by far, is those Jewish communities fleeing persecution in Europe to come and live among Muslims, which was a relatively pluralist society. The Islamic Empire spanned 500 years and clearly isn't a monolith, but the Jewish Golden Age literally happened in Muslim Spain. Which means by far the most relevant eras to discuss are 1 and 2, from when political Zionism was invented in the late 1800s up until today. This is the era when a group of oppressed people in Europe teamed up with their oppressors to associate their political movement with religious zealotry, oppress and displace, eventually violently, the indigenous population, which included not only Muslim Palestinians, but Palestinian Jews and Christians as well. In the next couple of videos, I will cover eras 3 and 4, the ones before the Ottoman Empire, but after that, we will mostly be focusing on everything that happened after the advent of political Zionism. TLDR, when in doubt, remember, Nakba 1948, everything else about Palestine kind of spirals out from there. I'm Paul Nabil, Syrian American, and thanks for watching my series Start Here.